Our lecture topic today is the objectivist virtue of independence. Independence is the basic posture of the objectivist social ethics and politics. When we understand this virtue well, we see how we stand in relation to other people in the most basic sense. Human beings are social animals, and as infants we're helpless and require intensive care and love from others if we're to live and prosper. We grow up and are educated in groups: the family, the classroom, the school, the team, the club, and so on. They all teach us. As adults, we rarely spend long periods of time roaming far from others. Here in the industrialized world, by far the vast majority of us live in urban areas, tightly packed among our fellows. We work in groups, in companies and departments, institutes and farms. We depend for our lives on the goods we get from others through sales networks, distribution centers, internet retailers, and shopping malls. We take recreation with others, in teams again, and as families, or with friends, or in theaters, at resorts, on airplane flights, watching shows, and going on tours with tour groups through famous sites. The life of the mind is social as well. From the languages we acquire to the lessons we learn, virtually all the knowledge and skills we derive from material taught to us by others. Our ideas of art and our philosophic or religious ideals depend largely on works and theories created by others. So right now you're in the process of getting ideas from another person, namely me, based on the ideas of another person, namely Ayn Rand. Given this fact of human thought, people have conceived of social organization in ways that account for the collective institutions and processes that shape all of human civilization. So theories have been proposed, for example, that trace human history through nations, or classes, or language groups, or races. Theories of knowledge have been proposed that define human knowledge in terms of the characteristic beliefs of social cultural groupings. That was the theme of David Kelly's talk today about the epistemology of Friedrich Hayek. There are theories that explain the development of scientific truth as a kind of group consensus in the scientific community. Because we're so social in so many of the things we do, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we remain, first and foremost, individuals. In fact, that's exactly what some of the theories I just mentioned have lost sight of. This is the theme of the virtue of independence, that you must live in society as an individual. You must do so because in the end there is nothing in society but individuals. All knowledge is knowledge of individuals. It rests in their minds. Its status as knowledge depends on their grasp of the facts. All language is language of individuals. Only each individual knows what he means by the words he uses. All work is work of individuals. Each person moves his own body. Each person chooses his own actions. Each person joins or does not join in an enterprise or a production process. Production techniques are used by individual people. It's up to the individuals to use them correctly. All organizations are organizations of individuals. All nations are nations of individuals who emigrate or immigrate by their own lights. It's individuals who form the government, individuals who submit to it, and it is individuals who rebel against it. All crimes are crimes of individuals. All law is known by individuals, and laws are only enforced by individuals. And despite the fact that we're embedded in an ever-shifting web of social relations and institutions, human beings are individuals. We have no thought that is literally collective. We take no action as one with others. In social science, the recognition of this basic fact is called methodological individualism. Methodological individualism means making it part of the method of social science to treat all institutions as the products of individual action and to never accept causal accounts formulated fundamentally in terms of collectives. Firms don't act, their employees act. Nations don't vote, their citizens do. Governments don't make war, their presidents, their legislators, and their soldiers do. And most importantly, subcultures don't shape popular trends. Teenagers do. Well, just kidding. I mean, teenage individuals do. For philosophy, which underlies and integrates all of science and social science, methodological individualism is essential to an objective epistemology, an objective moral theory, and objective aesthetic and political theories. For those who seek to follow the teachings of philosophy, this boils down to one simple message. There are only individuals, and you are one. Now, this fundamental individualism does not deny that there are social institutions. It does not deny that social institutions have certain properties in virtue of the collective web of social relations they encompass. Nations exist. It's meaningful to speak of the law. There are languages, and certainly there are popular trends, especially those caused by or embraced by teenagers. But individual human beings are the atoms of society, the basic building blocks that form the structures. Individuals are the entities in whose behavior we observe patterns like the spread of ideas or cultural trends. So we must never lose sight of the basic social fact that there are only individuals and you are one. Now, objectivism recognizes that the ultimate good, the basis of all our normative judgments, is radically individualistic. It is your life and your happiness in living. What is right and wrong for you ultimately comes down to what's best or worst for your life. Morality is a general code to guide human action, but there is no collective good, no social duty that overrides the value of our individual lives. So the principles of morality are true only insofar as they are true of each of us individually. And so it is for objectivism. Objectivism must answer this basic question: how should I, as an individual, relate to others? What should be my basic relation to the rest of society? The virtue of independence gives us the essential answer to that question. The virtue of independence, wrote Ayn Rand, means the acceptance of the responsibility of forming one's own judgments and of living by the work of one's own mind. So independence, as Rand's description indicates, has two distinct aspects. The first of these is cognitive independence, which Rand describes as forming one's own judgments. The second, cognitive independence is thinking independently. And there is existential independence, what Rand calls living by the work of one's own mind. Existential independence means supporting one's life independently. Now, in the rest of the lecture, I'm going to talk about these two elements of independence, cognitive independence first, and then existential independence. And I'm going to be talking about the importance of trade in social relations in the context of existential independence. So in conclusion, I'll be talking about how this view of life fits together. So let's continue with cognitive independence. Cognitive independence rests on the fact that reason is a faculty of the individual. We know something when our minds can relate an item of knowledge to facts in the world. And this is important to stress. Knowledge only exists in minds. There's no knowledge in books if no one reads and understands them. There's no knowledge in schools and universities unless teachers and students form it and hold it. And there's no knowledge without a connection to facts. The difference between scientific theory and groundless speculation is its basis in fact. The difference between a meaningful statement and an empty hash of floating abstractions is the connection to reality of the concepts from which the statement is formed. Our basic source of contact with reality is sense perception. All knowledge worthy of the name can be validated directly or indirectly in terms of our own individual experiences of the world. The standard for certainty is seeing a fact, perceiving it in our own bodies or minds, hearing it, bumping into it, or, if you must, smelling and tasting it. I mean that literally. What it means to be certain is to know a fact as surely as your direct grasp of the perceptual concretes in front of you right now. It requires judgment to form knowledge, and error is possible all along the way. To form knowledge, we need concepts, and we can make mistakes in identifying the essential traits of the things that the concept is meant to identify. This is why we need virtues of objectivity and integration, which are aspects of the virtue of rationality. We can have errors of knowledge. These errors can arise from evading the facts or evading logic in our thinking. They can arise from an error of inference or method, when you just slip up in following through a chain of reasoning, or you think something follows from another, you get 2 plus 2 and somehow you think 5 follows, and there you are. Misjudgment of essential factors or relevant context can also be a problem. You can just fail to take into account all the things that matter. There are also policies you can use for detecting errors of knowledge, and this is where these two sub-virtues of rationality come in. Objectivity counsels us to base all knowledge in the facts, and integration counsels us to relate all the facts to each other. So integration includes relating knowledge we already have to other items of knowledge, and relating new facts with existing knowledge. The commitment to objectivity and integration is something you have to do yourself. It's a process of thought only you can undertake. Only you are in a position to judge directly whether your knowledge is objective, based in the facts, and whether there are any contradictions between the knowledge you have and other facts. You detect such contradictions by integration. Ayn Rand summarized this point in her discussion of independence in Atlas Shrugged. She wrote, "Independence is the recognition of the fact that yours is the responsibility of judgment, and nothing can help you escape it. That no substitute can do your thinking, as no pinch hitter can live your life. That the vilest form of self-abasement and self-destruction is the subordination of your mind to the mind of another, the acceptance of an authority over your brain, the acceptance of his assertions as facts, his say-so as truth, his edicts as middleman between your consciousness and your existence." The essential point that Rand is making here is that you have to think for yourself. Only you can be objective. Only you can integrate your own knowledge. Now, there is knowledge that we get directly from personal experience. I mean, let's say you want to know whether it's raining. You can stick your head outside and look around. You judge the matter of truth directly through perception. Or let's say a friend asks you, which movie would you like to see tonight? If you know the answer, you know it directly by introspection. I mean, you know what you like. Or I hope you do. This kind of knowledge gives us a standard by which to rate knowledge to rate the knowledge we get by less direct means. And in fact, the truth is, we get vast amounts of knowledge by indirect means, through the services of others. How, for example, would I even know what movies were playing if I hadn't read the announcements in the newspaper? Well, I mean, maybe my friend told me what was playing, but same difference. I didn't know it through direct perception. We get all our news of the world from others through the media. We get virtually all our knowledge of scientific and technological advances from others through the media again. We get almost all our causal explanations from others through classroom instruction in science, through textbooks and engineering manuals, and through instructions written on packages. We get almost all our knowledge of new concepts from others through the dictionary and through the fresh instances that we hear from others. In the last few decades, for example, we've learned internet, for example, or cell phone, or blog. When you receive a new medicine at the pharmacy, how do you know what not to mix it with and what dosages to take? You learn it from the packaging, or from your doctor, or from the pharmacist. And if your car breaks down, how do you discover how to fix it? If you're mechanically inclined, you buy a manual and you read it, a manual written by others. So independence means relying on your own judgment. It means we should take what others tell us with a grain of salt. We aren't able to directly confirm the objectivity of their claims. We have to relate everything we think we know with the bedrock of our sense perceptions. Now, one reliable way to get knowledge from others is to do so through a system of guided instruction and proof. This is what happens in a science lab, for example, or when medical students check out the real human anatomy of a cadaver. For the medical students, more than half the value of working with the cadaver is just concretization. It lets them find out how to recognize anatomic parts in their natural context. But both the chemistry student in his lab and the med student poking about the cadaver use their own direct experience of the facts to confirm the contents of their textbook and their professor's lectures. That's guided instruction and proof. Similarly, mathematics students do the proofs that establish the truth of the methods and propositions their instructors are teaching them. And a budding car mechanic can find out if the manual is right by tearing apart an engine or two. This is certainly the soundest way to get information from others. In these cases, in effect, others guide us to knowledge we probably could not have reached without assistance. But we perform the necessary integrations and proofs so that in the end, we know the knowledge as surely as we know anything. Now, historically, the commitment of instructors to ground their teachings in proofs, and especially in empirical evidence, has revolutionized civilization. This commitment opened the door to the dissemination of science throughout the world. Before the scientific revolution of the 1700s, that's associated with the achievements of Galileo and Newton, instruction usually took the form of assertions from an authority, or collations of assertions from authorities. In general, authorities are present or historical figures we consider reliable guides to knowledge. Now, the problem with this method, of course, was that it was fallacious. Argument from authority is a standard fallacy in logic. Just because somebody said something doesn't make it true, no matter what the person's reputation. Truth, after all, is a relation between a claim and the facts. Reputation doesn't enter into it. Someone may know more than you do, but that doesn't ensure that what he says will be true. That person may be smarter than you, but that doesn't ensure that what he says will be true. That person may have a warm, resonant voice and the kindest eyes you've ever seen, but that doesn't ensure that what he says will be true. This is what Ayn Rand was advertising when she wrote, in the passage from Atlas Shrugged I quoted earlier, that the vilest form of self-abasement and self-destruction is the subordination of your mind to the mind of another, the acceptance of an authority over your brain, the acceptance of his assertions as facts, his say-so as truth, his edicts as middleman between your consciousness and your existence. And Rand is right. To simply accept what others say because they say it is to give up your mind and abandon your means of survival. That is pretty vile and self-destructive, isn't it? But now we seem to be in a pickle. I mean, now we are deep in the doo-doo. Because the truth is, if you can't rely on some experts and some kind of authorities and some reliable reports, then you don't know anything about any part of the world you haven't seen through your own eyes or through an apparatus you've tested for accuracy. Would anyone here know that there's an Amazon River? You can't trust the maps if you haven't proved them right. Would any of you know that would any of you know what the Major League Baseball standings are right now? I guess you would have had to have watched all the games all season long to be sure of the scores. Would any of you be the least bit sure that any international political events are happening right now? You certainly couldn't trust the papers. For that matter, what if your lover gave you a passionate vow of love in the most intimate and stimulating terms? Why should you believe a word? It's just another argument from authority, isn't it? The objectivist epistemology isn't ridiculous. It doesn't deny the accuracy and usefulness of most news reports. It isn't any more indifferent to your lover's statements of passionate regard than you are. To understand what independence means in these cases, we need to do two things. First, as I said, we need to remember to take some kinds of testimony with a grain of salt. It happens sometimes that outright falsehoods about the facts get reported in the New York Times. Even scientific experts sometimes exceed their competency. Instruction manuals can be an error too, and if you've ever assembled a gas grill or a snowblower, like I have, you know this for a fact. But second, before we accept someone else's testimony for a fact, we need to have causal reasons to conclude that the testimony is true. causal reasons. So here are some basic standards I've identified for determining the causal context of the statements you get from others. One of these is past reliability. The reputation that someone has doesn't make what they say true, and yet it gives you reason to believe, other things equal, that they're likely to be true. If they're inclined to give accurate reports by character, then that's an indication that you might give more weight to their statement than you would to others. But again, it doesn't make it true, and the ultimate standard of truth is confirmation in sense perception. You can think about the incentives that the information provider has. What kind of incentives do they have? They could have financial incentives, for instance, like purchasers and advertisers. They could have, for instance, think about a newspaper for a second. I mean, a newspaper has to sell papers, and its purpose is to tell people true news of the world. So if a newspaper starts to distort the news, you have to think what effect that would have on its sales. I mean, maybe what if all its customers have a strict ideological bent? You know, they're all extreme right-wing fundamentalists. Then maybe you'd have reason to doubt, based on the incentives of selling that paper, that it does tell the truth. But if the purchasers are generally depending on it for true news that they're going to depend on to take practical action, then you'd think the newspaper would have a real financial incentive to give accurate information. Also, newspapers have advertisers who depend on the circulation of the paper and its success. So again, a failure to do things would fail. Another kind of incentive is the incentive of reputation itself. Brands and products that have a good reputation tend to sell better. So, for instance, in instructional materials, you would think that the creators of machines and kits that include instructional materials have good reason to try and make those instructional materials good, because if they keep making them bad, then people won't buy the products. And reputation matters for the news in this way. But consider if someone comes to you bearing evidence that they're innocent of a charge against them. But then you have to think, well, what is their incentive for providing that information? Maybe they have a strong incentive to try and convince you that they're innocent, even when the truth might be different. Another incentive is ideological. I mean, consider, for instance, if you read an activist press release from like the Earthwatch Institute, or even an activist press release from the Objectivist Center. If you know that the Objectivist Center, the Atlas Society, is oriented towards promoting free market capitalism, you might suspect that the press release from the Atlas Society will promote free market capitalism. So you should probably check it against other sources that you know not to be committed to that ideological position. Even though it's true that the Atlas Society is committed to reason first and any conclusion second. Another important principle for checking the testimony of others is independent review. Is there some system, for instance, that provides critics who have an interest in accuracy who review something? This happens in academic and scientific papers where they get independent reviewers to read the material and check it so that you know if something's published in a reputable journal, it's been checked by multiple people, not all of whom had a direct interest in confirming the results. If there's a free press and a communication of competitors, then you know that every news source has a range of critics out looking for it. And particularly today, in the era of the blog, now every single news source that puts out news knows that there's thousands of people who are going to be fact-checking it and putting the news up on the web. And that's a very positive effect in terms of the accuracy of the news, because it means that we have strong reasons to believe that false news reports will get identified. So independent review is actually very important. But you have to watch out for log rolling. This also happens in academic papers. They'll rope in some people who know the editor to do the reviewing, and then they appear to be independent, but in fact, they're just carrying the ball for the editor or the author. So the very best is independent confirmation from other sources. The best kind of independent review just goes at the same issues completely independently and comes at it separately. Then you've got strong reasons to believe that what you're hearing is actually the truth. And finally, there's integration with the knowledge of others. The bottom line here is that it's up to you to decide what information to accept and with what degree of certainty. It's up to you to judge the quality of that information rationally, and it's up to you to take responsibility for the truth of your ideas. Now, if you practice cognitive independence, you take responsibility for grounding your ideas in the facts of your own experience. You are the final judge. It's up to you to make sure your reasoning is objective and your concepts are well formed, no matter who you learned your arguments from or who taught you your concepts. It's up to you to assess the potential for unreliability in the news reports and other testimonial evidence you interpret. So don't buy any papers that distort the truth. Complain to manufacturers if their assembly manuals are wrong. And this is what cognitive independence means, because cognitive independence is the commitment to acting by one's independent judgment. And so it's up to you to integrate, and integrate. Integration is your contradiction catcher, your hunter of bugs. Don't accept discrepancies. Don't blank out over contradictory indications. Don't ignore an issue after you hear the report you like. Relate your knowledge of the facts together in a web so tight, no false report can escape. Integrate. Now, I'd like to turn to the other half of the virtue of independence. This is existential independence. As Ayn Rand described it, it is living by the work of one's own mind. Thus, the ideal of existential independence is to live by one's own productive effort. When we work, we produce values that can be traded to others. The fruit of our labor can be bought and sold, sponsored or underwritten, and enjoyed by other people throughout the world. The importance of one's commitment to producing one's values is the focus of Ayn Rand's virtue of productiveness. Productiveness is a commitment to achieve one's values through productive work. So a major aspect of this virtue is pursuing a career of productive work. But here, I want to focus on the individual in his dealings with others. Existential independence is the policy of relying fundamentally on oneself as the source of one's own values rather than others. Now, in the free market, we deal with others by economic trade. Mostly, we buy and sell things with money. But by working at our jobs, by investing our money, or by running companies or organizations, or working in proper governmental activities, we earn the money to support ourselves. But even though we earn our money by our own work, we're still, in a way, dependent on others for value. We rely day to day on shops for things like food and gasoline. We rely on technicians to fix our cars and our other machinery. And we rely, as you've noticed, on the media to bring us news and entertainment too. So, how could one be said to be living in a fundamentally independent manner? The answer is, we're living by trade. We give value to others for every value we get. We do not depend on the baker to provide us with bread. We depend on ourselves to give him good reasons to provide bread, usually $2 or $3 worth of reasons. Fundamentally, the banker owes us nothing. It's his own interest that serves us. We don't depend on the newspaper to provide the news of the day. We depend on ourselves to provide the publisher with good reasons to provide news. These reasons include the subscription money we pay and our mere presence as readers, for which his advertisers will be thankful. Fundamentally, the publisher owes us nothing. It's his own interest that serves us. And this is how trade works in the economic sphere. When we earn the values we use to trade and then trade value for value, we maintain our economic independence while benefiting greatly from the productive efforts of others. Ayn Rand argued that economic trade provides us with a moral model for social relations more generally. Trade is the way we ought to deal with other people. Her vision of independent social relations is called the trader principle. And that's trader as in trade, not as in betrayer. We're talking about Sam Walton here, not Benedict Arnold. In Atlas Shrugged, Rand wrote, "The moral symbol of respect for human beings is the trader. A trader is a man who earns what he gets and does not give or take the undeserved. A trader does not ask to be paid for his failures, nor does he ask to be loved for his flaws. A trader does not squander his body as fodder or his soul as alms. His soul as alms. He does not squander his body as fodder or his soul as alms." In this conception, trade is voluntary exchange to mutual benefit. It's mutual benefit, that is, it's not sacrificing oneself and not sacrificing other people. It's voluntary. It's not coercive. Force is inimical to trade. In his self-help book, The 7 Habits of Habit, that self-help book is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it was written by Stephen Covey. In it, Covey points out that his successful business people, the ones he's talking about, try to always work out arrangements with others of the form, I win and you win. Win-win. That's the attitude of a trader. Let's consider the difference between trade and what's not trade. It's trade to go shopping. It's not trade to engage in theft. It's trade to form a labor contract for your work. It's not trade to engage in fraud and misrepresent the work you're going to do. Trade involves investing, putting money to work and effort to work and time to work over the long term for a long-term return. But extortion, where you offer no value in return, just threats, is not trade. Friendship is a trade. Because in a friendship, the friends give values to each other. They support each other. They are sympathetic with each other. They share jokes and happiness with each other. They share ideas with each other. A good friendship is balanced in this respect. Each friend is getting benefit from the friendship. What's not trade is almsgiving. So when you're giving away your time or your support to others simply for their benefit, without any regard for your own values and what you will achieve in the end from it. A healthy marriage is trade because it's based in a respect among the partners in the marriage. Both partners in the marriage ought to be able to say, I know why I'm here, and I know it's making me better off than I would be outside of this arrangement. It's not trade if it's in a marriage coerced by relations, or a marriage which is abusive, or a marriage where one person remains committed for completely self-sacrificial reasons. And that's not trade because both parties aren't benefiting. It's trade to exchange gifts like you do at Christmas, or you do in the round of the year in birthdays. That's trade because it's part of a broad policy of exchanging benefits back and forth. You wouldn't think much of a situation where you're the only one who gives gifts and you never get anything back. Of course, you don't want to necessarily, it's not a money one-for-one relationship, but you like to feel like you're part of a community of traders and people that are giving gifts around back. But it's not trade to engage in emotional extortion, to say, oh, you owe me something and you've got to give it to me. Oh, I wanna, please pay for this, I wanna. That's not trade. So trade is against mooching values, because it counsels never tolerating a moocher. And trade is against coercion, because trade is against trying to coerce other people, and it counsels not tolerating coercion. And it's against power seeking, like in the example of Gail Winan in The Fountainhead. When a trader doesn't seek to control other people the way Winan does. Rather, he seeks to achieve his own values independently. Ayn Rand represented this idea of the trader in The Fountainhead with the idea of first-hand versus second-hand living. On the personal level, the first-hand person lives by independence. and the second-hand person depends on others for his ideas, for his spirit, for the way he guides himself in life. And Rand represented this with the contrast of Howard Roark and Peter Keating in the Fountainhead. Keating always does what his mother told him to do or what was expected of him. He makes the buildings everyone else thinks would be nice, whereas Roark always acts on his own judgment and acts for his own values. It's Roark who really wants to be an architect, and Keating is just being an architect because he was told that was the right thing to do. That's dependence on the part of Keating, but independence on the part of Roark. On the social level, the first-hand living is to live by trade, to exchange value for value, to let each person stand on their own feet and really be a functioning moral end in himself. The second-hand way is through power. It's to try and control people or manipulate people, to view people as something you extract wealth or benefits from, rather than people you interact with through trade. That's the second-hand way. The alternative, living first-hand, is to deal with others by the open handshake of trade. And the alternative is live as a kind of slave to others, being enslaved to their thinking, their conclusions, their failures of knowledge, and often their outright mendacity. Existentially, living second-hand or being dependent means being enslaved either to their whims or their fear. The manipulator has the false power of doing mostly what the mob wants to do, which was represented by Gail Winan in The Fountainhead. And then the predator, like a Trotsky or a Saddam Hussein, if he's fortunate enough to survive, as they did not, finds himself enslaved to the fear and hatred of others. The second-hander is chained to the worst in his victims. The first-hander relies, by contrast, on the best in himself and on the best in others as well. So we've seen that independence has two elements, cognitive independence and existential independence. We've seen that independence means living as a trader and bringing a win-win attitude to social relations. But I don't want to stop there, because while the logic of independence has two parts, I don't think that the experience of living independently is like that. As I just noted, living independently is, as a whole, like approaching the world firsthand. Independence is also a stance against tribalism. Tribalism was the term Ayn Rand used for identifying oneself fundamentally with a group. Since one is in fact an individual, one is not fundamentally defined by any group. An independent person joins groups based on shared values and interests. You might support the Atlas Society because of the values we promote. You might join a playdate group to meet your neighbors and provide playmates for your children. You might join a country because of the political freedoms it offers. You might enjoy taking part in activities that reflect an affinity of your youth or your hometown. But whatever groups you join, they should reflect you and your values, not the other way around. And for exactly the same reasons that you should not define yourself in terms of a group, so you should remember individualism at all times in the way you regard others. Nothing is so repugnant to an individualist view of society than to reduce others to membership in a race, a sex, a tribe, a religion. We should always strive to see the individual in others, the independent person who's always there despite the cultural, ethnic, sexual, and philosophical differences. And your independence makes you resistant to social pressure, including the expectations of others. Others don't determine for you what is or is not knowledge. They certainly shouldn't be able to determine for you what your values or course in life should or should not be. An independent person doesn't just go along with his peers. He doesn't just reject his peers either. He isn't defined by his peers, and he tries to see what positive relations he can have with them. This means, too, that independence stands against conformism, keeping up with the Joneses, chasing the next fad. Social trends, you can take them or leave them. Let your values do the talking. One common source of social pressure and expectations is one's family. The independent person may find value in family relations, but knows he's not bound by duty to his family. Let me remark, though, I'm not talking about relations among mature people here. excuse me, what I meant was that what I am talking about is the relations among mature people, because the relation of young children and the parents is much more complicated. But in any case, the demands of our families can make of us can at best be like the demands of other kinds of loved ones, friends, lovers, etc. They deserve consideration due to the intimacy of the relation, but nothing trumps your independent judgment. You have to decide what you will be and who you will love and honor. In the objectivist ethics, you're the moral center. You choose to live. You pursue your values. You cultivate virtues in yourself for your own ultimate benefit. Independence keeps us mindful of this in our social relations. It guards you against the temptation to substitute the authority of another for your own thought. It guards you against the twin snares of abusing and being abused by others, economically or spiritually or emotionally. Ayn Rand made the connection between the ultimate value in ethics and the principle of independence this way in The Fountainhead. She said, "You don't think through another's brain, and you don't work through another's hands. When you suspend your faculty of independent judgment, you suspend consciousness, and to stop consciousness is to stop life." That's the negative aspect of independence, what it counsels you not to do. But it has a positive message too, that your life comes down to you, your experiences, your judgment, your values, and your choices. Independence and the traitor principle give us guidance in remaining the authors of our own lives, even as we navigate the rich swirl of experiences, institutions, opportunities, and relationships that is human society. Thank you.